Holden Caulfield stood in the biting winter air of Central Park, hands buried deep in his coat pockets, watching Phoebe ride the carousel. The painted horses bobbed up and down as the carousel spun. Their colors faded but still bright enough to catch the soft light of the gray sky. Phoebe sat on a white horse with a chipped mane, her small hands gripping the pole, her face a mixture of joy and concentration as she reached for the golden ring. Holden felt a strange sensation wash over him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't quite happiness, but it was close, an aching, bittersweet peace that left him standing there, rooted to the spot. For once, he wasn't thinking about phonies or running away or the world's endless disappointments. For once, he was simply watching Phoebe, and it was enough. Phoebe stretched for the ring again, her small hand darting out each time the carousel turned. Holden knew the risks. If she leaned too far, she could fall. But for some reason, he didn't feel the usual surge of panic or the urge to stop her. He just stood there, letting the moment unfold. He thought about what Mr. Anellini had said, the terrible fall that awaited people like him, those who couldn't adapt, couldn't find a place in the world. Maybe Mr. Anellini was right. Maybe everyone had to face their own fall at some point, but it wasn't his job to stop them. Phoebe was trying to grab the golden ring, and if she fell, she'd get back up. That's what people did. That's what life was. She'll be fine, he muttered to himself, though the words felt heavy in his mouth. When Phoebe finally caught the ring, she let out a triumphant laugh, holding it high above her head like a trophy. Holden smiled, his breath clouding the air. For a fleeting moment, everything felt right. After the carousel slowed to a stop, Phoebe ran toward Holden, her cheeks flushed from the cold and excitement. She handed him the golden ring as if it were a gift, and he accepted it with a small, lopsided grin. "You can keep it, kid," he said, his voice softer than usual. "It's yours." Phoebe didn't argue, but she stayed close to him, wrapping her arms around his waist in a brief hug before pulling away. Holden looked down at her and realized how much he needed her, how much her presence kept him from completely unraveling. For all his talk about protecting her, maybe she was the one saving him. As they walked through the park, Holden's mind began to clear. He still felt lost, still unsure of what his future held, but the crushing weight of his despair had lifted slightly. For the first time, he considered the possibility of staying. He thought of facing the music with his parents, of just trying to make things better. It wouldn't be easy. He knew that. But running away wouldn't solve anything, and he couldn't bear the thought of leaving Phoebe behind. She needed him, and maybe, just maybe, he needed her too. "I'll stick around for a while," he said suddenly, his voice breaking the silence. Phoebe looked up at him, her face lighting up with hope. "You mean it?" Holden nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure if he meant it. But the look on her face was enough to make him want to try. The story doesn't end there, of course. Holden narrated these events from the mental health facility where he now stayed, reflecting on everything that had led him to this point. He wasn't fixed. He didn't even know if he wanted to be fixed, but he was still here, still trying. He thought about all the people he had met along the way. The nuns at the cafe, Sally Hayes, Carl Luce, Mr. Anellini. Even the phonies, even the ones who had disappointed him, all seemed to take on a new significance as he looked back. He missed them, in a strange way, even though he hadn't liked most of them. Missing people was funny like that. It didn't require them to be perfect. And then there was Phoebe. Thinking about her made his chest ache in a way that was both painful and comforting. She was still out there, still grabbing for her golden rings, and he knew she'd be okay. She'd fall, sure, but she'd get back up. She always did. Holden's final thoughts weren't about running away or catching kids in fields of rye. They weren't even about the phonies or the fall or the weight of the world. They were about the carousel, about Phoebe, about the way life kept turning. "I think I'm going to be all right," he said, though he wasn't entirely sure if he believed it. But it was a start, and for now, that was enough. Holden's story is not one of triumph or resolution. but of fragile peace and small steps forward. He remains a boy caught between childhood and adulthood, grappling with the loss of innocence and the weight of growing up. But in Phoebe's laughter, in the spinning of a carousel, he finds a sliver of hope, proof that life, in all its messiness, is still worth living. The Catcher in the Rye may never save everyone from falling, but maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is learning to catch yourself.